We're ready. We're ready to go. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the Conscious Life Expo 2022. Just keep the center aisle free because we're going to be live streaming this to the rest of the world because no one wants to miss this really historic occasion. I am really honored to be introducing these two veterans of ufology because they have done the hard work. They've done the boots on the ground. They are hugely influential in this whole field. My name is Alan Steinfeld, and I've been influenced a lot in my own understanding of the work of Paula Harris and Jacques Vallée. I mean, I don't think we'd even be in a situation where we can openly discuss UFOs if it wasn't for the work of these two people. And Paula's work with Colonel Corso and Alan Hynek, and of course Jacques Vallée he's really the godfather of ufology, and it's so important that this work now, this new historic occasion about Trinity is coming out because, you know, you look through a lot of UFO books and you don't find anything new. It's rehashing the old stuff, but this discovery, this input into the field opens it up on a new level, and that's so exciting. And, you know, Trinity, the best kept secret, it is a breakthrough for the rest of the world to know what the deeper truth of this phenomenon is all about. So I'm really honored to be here. I'm really happy that you're here on this very major occasion. Thank you both. Let's give Paula and Jacques a really, really big hand for being here today. Thank you.
I think we may have a film to begin. We have a little clip of Trinity that we were supposed to show. Do we have that? The clip? And then we can begin, and we're just going to do like a living room chat. It's going to be like informal, right, Jacques? But I think that you need to see field research, and the clip has where we went. When we talk about what we did, it's a 9-year process for me and a 5-year process for Jacques. So, is the clip, can we do that?
Give me 2 minutes and you'll have it.
Okay, and it's really fast, it's only 8 minutes, but you need to know that that both Jacques and I, when we do a story, we have to go there and we have to talk to the witnesses. And this was in Socorro, near Socorro, it's San Antonio, New Mexico. I had been working there for 5 years. I found out about the story when I was in Italy. So we're going to show the clip, but before we do that, I have to tell you the influence that these kinds of things have. We're live streaming, and 2 years ago, I got a call from Demi Lovato, and she said to me, Paula, I saw you at Conscious Life Expo, and I saw that you, all about your international research. And she had watched the live streaming or DVDs, one or the other. And I had a 3-hour conversation with her. And what she asked me for were books. She said, I want to know it all, but I can't just do it by talking to you. She said, will you send me books? So I sent her a box of books. She lives in Los Angeles. Thank you, Demi, for being interested. Here tonight, this afternoon, is Demi Lovato's mother and sister. If you want to stand up. Stand up. Diana, and Dallas. And so what it started, and I wish my kids would do that. My kids don't even read my books. Mom, have fun. You're into something we're not into. Have fun. That's how my children talk. And so it is so heartwarming for me to know somebody as young as your daughter, as Demi, would be interested in this. Because I know that when Jacques and I go to the happy hunting grounds. There are people out there, young people, that want to read, that want to know the research, that care about what we did. Because our only, Jacques and I don't mean to speak for you, is that we want to do a good job, and we want to get to the truth. So the fact that a young person like Demi, who has a lot of influence in this way, could help us with taking seriously this research is just incredible for us. And then our friend Paul Hynek. Stand up, Paul. This is a Jacques Vallée. I've known Paul for many years when he was a kid. So he keeps calling me, he always says to me, "You're not the boss of me," because I knew his mom and dad really well. His mom and dad, I went to Evanston, Illinois, he was a kid. And I always go, "Paul," and he goes, "You're not the boss of me."
I have read my father's books and your books.
Oh, good. He's a reader, too.
We're ready for
So
Paul.
this is kind of history here because Paul, representing his family, who did so much working with Jacques for many years, and the next generation, Demi and the next generation, it makes us feel good. I think it makes us feel good that this is going to go on. So, are we ready? Okay, cool. Okay, in those short sequences, you saw the bracket, the piece, and Jacques will talk about that. You saw us out in the field. You saw us with Jose Padilla, who is in his 80s. And you saw Sabrina, the witness we just found 2 years ago. This is a story, and I'm going to start framing it, and then I'm going to leave it to Jacques to talk for the rest of the time. This is a story about children having an experience. So for us, it's very, very emotional, because what happened was that in 1945, two little boys were looking for cattle, and Jacques will go into the details of a cow that was supposed to calve. And in the meantime, there was a thunderstorm, and they went for shelter under an arroyo, and they actually saw the craft come in and do a landing, and take out a piece of a communication tower. So they saw all this. Remy was 7 and Jose was 9. And they're watching this. In 1945, before Kenneth Arnold coins the term UFO, before Roswell, with no television, with no references to UFOs, this is all new material because they didn't have any frame of reference for what crashed. And what they thought was, naturally, it was an airplane and there might be survivors, so they went over there and actually witnessed the damage, witnessed the three creatures, and they waited for the Army Air Force that did not they were together, the Army and Air Force in 1947, to come and clean something up that had not happened before. It is 1 month after the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb was detonated in July 16th, and this happened August 18th of the same year, 1945. So for us, writing the book was history, because it was before Roswell, and we had the witnesses in detail. We had them still alive. We had the location. Roswell is 3 miles strewn of debris. We had the exact location, and we also had an artifact and testimony of other artifacts that Jacques will tell you about from Sabrina, the last witness we found. So we had everything there. And I had started in Italy because I had read an article about this, and I was wondering why my colleagues hadn't gone down there. But I think everybody has in their mind, Roswell was the first, and nobody bothered to check anything else before that. It became a problem. So destiny had it that the son of the pilot that overflew that area called me on the phone and gave me the telephone number of the 7-year-old. And I was on the phone with him for 9 months before he trusted me enough to tell me the story. And that's how it works sometimes. So I had already been working on it, and I had gone down there several times with several film crews and so forth. And then Jacques had heard about the fact there was metal involved, and he contacted me, and he said, he came down right away. He came to New Mexico right away, to Socorro. And from that point on, I'll just say one thing, because I want Jacques to tell you the details of this story. I thank God, because I'd been working on it for 4 years and nobody took it seriously. We have a kind of mythology where Roswell is the first one, and anything before that, forget it. And when Jacques came down there and said, oh dear, we have everything here. We have the witnesses, we have the location, and then he went and did all the history around it. He said, this case needs to be put in a history book, and that's what Trinity is. It's got UFOs in it, but it is a real story that really happened to these children who are now able to talk about it. And I would like to turn it over to Jacques to tell you the story of Trinity.
What Paola didn't tell you is that her research on this case, which happened 4 years before I became involved, was impeccable, and she is the only one who spoke to both of the witnesses. By then, they were older men, and it's great that you did that, because one of them died before I became involved. But I had the privilege of being able to work from the transcripts of all those interviews that Paola has done as a professional reporter, journalist. Before I continue the story, I want to get back to the point of what an extraordinary moment in time we're living now, where the subject is now recognized. The Director of Central Intelligence has acknowledged publicly that the intelligence community did not have an answer to this problem after 70 years of study by the Air Force and by other agencies within our government and other governments, that we don't have the answer, and that it's going to be up to us, to volunteers, to private researchers, and to the scientific community to get involved. So, as you may know, I've been involved in this research for a long time. I saw a UFO myself when I was 15 in France, and that determined it triggered a kind of curiosity that stays with you throughout life, and I still want to know. And the best way to know is not to go to the government, it's go to the people who've seen something. And you'll see as we go through this story, which is just beginning, actually. I mean, there are a lot of more things that are going to happen to this story, but you'll see that that involvement was very rich and complex, and it gave us a new insight into the whole problem.
Jacques, let me just say for you people, how many people have seen Close Encounters of the Third Kind? You know that was Jacques Vallée that was represented in that film, right? And I never, in my wildest imagination, dreamed I would ever meet him. That film made me cry when I was in my 30s and I was watching it, and I didn't even care about UFOs. I was a teacher, and I thought, oh my God, is this stuff real? And that's how I ended. I went to see your father, Alan Hynek, and he said, you speak Italian, so can you work with me? And I said, okay, but I never dreamed I'd actually meet the guy in the movie. So I wanted to make sure people knew that.
So I see my role, first I feel very privileged to still be alive when this change happens, because I've worked with many people, including Dr. Hynek, who were waiting for the day when the scientific community especially would at least acknowledge that there is a phenomenon there, and later we'll find out what it is. But let's agree that these things are really seen by real people who are not lying, who are not. And he didn't have a chance to see that day. We've seen that day. It opens up a whole new phase. And I see my role now is not to go over what happened, in 1960 or 1975, but to transmit what the knowledge of that history to the new people, to the young people who are coming into this, because they have a challenge. And I don't care, how many degrees they have. And I'm fortunate to have been invited to the Harvard group that is now, under the director of the dean of astronomy at Harvard. There's a group of about 80 people, including many scientists, who are now developing new theories and new instruments to document the phenomenon. But it's going to take them a couple of years to come to grips with the variety of testimony and the different forms that the phenomenon is taking. And this is one of the forms. As part of my research, as you may know, Paola and I are probably two of the people who've done the most investigation on the ground within the United States, but also in the rest of the world, in Latin America, of course in France, and I've been in Russia 4 times, and I've looked at the phenomenon in other countries. And so the information that we can bring comes from the mouths of babes, and from experienced people who actually were confronted with the phenomenon. And this case is one example. I had, at the time when Paola was looking at this case, I had gone to New Mexico with a different group of people to look at materials. I mean, one of the things that we can do now is to verify the testimony of witnesses who say that they saw an object, and after that they recovered some physical object that can be tested. And it turns out that in my science career, I've worked a lot in Silicon Valley, with people who were experimenting with very fancy materials and had built new instrumentation to test those materials. So we had convenient access to prototypes of testing machines in Silicon Valley, some of which were developed for biology, but could be adapted to strange materials. That had been done before. There is nothing new with analyzing those materials. Goes back at least 40 years. Professor Sturrock, with whom I worked at Stanford, had obtained material from Brazil, from a place called Ubatuba, where an object actually exploded over the town and ejected pure magnesium. The problem is that the magnesium was purer than the international magnesium standard. And so how do you, and this is the kind of thing you run into when you're a scientist trying to, you think, well, I have 2 PhDs, I've been teaching physics, I've been doing all that. Now I should be able to come into the UFO problem and solve it. Well, guess again, forget your 2 PhDs, forget everything you've done. The phenomenon is going to present you with things you've never seen before. And things that the government has never seen before also, because they are essentially in the same boat when you're at the level of the actual contact with the ground, with what people have said, and how it has impacted their lives. So there is now a cadre of scientists who got this, are educating themselves and starting to apply their instrumentation to documenting the phenomenon at every level. It's going to take a few years, and we see this book as one of the documents we can present to them to help them understand what you have to do if you really want to get to the basis of the data. I've been doing this for 5 years. As Paola mentioned, she's been doing it for 9 years, and we've seen all the evolution and all the reactions, including the reactions from the UFO community to what we've done. And it's going to take a while for that message to really evolve and penetrate and be understood. The situation is very much as Paola described. I had been involved in 2 other cases in New Mexico at the time when we were actually going there with shovels and digging up artifacts, digging up things that could be either old metal pieces from aircraft that had crashed back when in the 40s and 50s, or they could be something related to a sighting of an extraordinary machine of some sort that witnesses were describing. So we were right in the middle of that, beginning to test that material when I became aware of your work, Paola. And at that point, realizing that the witnesses were still alive, at least one of the main witnesses was still alive, and there were other documents and other proofs that something had happened, that I had the privilege of being involved in Paola's research. The site is very interesting, and the time is very interesting. And this is something that people have missed, including people who've done research on similar places in New Mexico and elsewhere. The site is a gully in New Mexico. New Mexico is dry most of the time until it's not dry. When it's not dry, the creeks flood and people can die being caught in floods even in downtown Albuquerque. So the landscape has been shaped. Remember, this happened in 1945, and we're here many years later. The ground has changed, and any idea that you can go there with a shovel and dig up part of a flying saucer, you give up on that idea very quickly. What you have is a very interesting complex of a property that's very large. It's a large ranch which is leased by the state to local ranchers and local farmers, and there is cattle on those ranches. And you need to get permission to go through the fence and get on those properties. The first question people ask is, look, I mean, 2 kids, I mean, give me a break. I mean, 9-year-old and 7-year-old, what do they know? Okay. Well, they know a lot because this is 1945. All the adults are at war. They are either on a ship somewhere in the Pacific, or they are still wrapping up the war in Europe, in Germany, and Central Europe. So the kids have a responsibility for the property. So those 2 kids drive the family truck. I mean, you're not going to have a collision with anything in New Mexico when you leave the main road, okay? So it's pretty safe. For a 9-year-old can drive a truck, and they have responsibility for keeping the fences clean and in good shape so that the cattle doesn't wander off. They have responsibility for watching the cattle, and they are there on that particular day. It's 2 days after the capitulation of Japan. They are there because a cow just had a calf, and the father wants to know, is everything all right with the animals, with the cattle. They do find the baby. They find that the mother is okay, and they are going to report that. And then there is a tremendous sound, tremendous shock that reminds them, they tell us, it reminds them of the explosion that took place 4 weeks before, the explosion of the first atom bomb in the world. Don't tell me that coincidence is meaningless, because this is a unique time in history. There has never been an explosion of an atom bomb. This is the first time it happens. Okay? There will be 2 more after that, of course, in Japan, in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The history books say that there was a test in New Mexico that the team of Oppenheimer, Enrico Fermi, and the great scientists whom I learned in school, their physics, they were there in a secret project, as you know, to establish the dominance of the United States in a new type of weapon that was very controversial, and it's still controversial today as to whether we should have used it or not. So they did a test. They didn't do a test. You cannot do a test of an atom bomb. Either it works or it doesn't. They didn't know whether it would work. It didn't work the way their equations were predicting it would work. It was 4 times more powerful. It was equal to the bomb that leveled Nagasaki. It was a plutonium bomb. It was the first time in history that a plutonium bomb had been built and detonated. As you know, there has never been another atom bomb exploded in the United States above ground. And there has never been an atom bomb exploded in conflict in the last 70 years. So think about what that means for history, for the history of civilization, for the history of man on this planet. Okay, those two kids are there. They hear a boom. They realize that something has hit that communication tower. The communication tower is one of a network of towers around White Sands. White Sands is a very large area which was used for testing of military equipment, essentially. Within White Sands, there is an airfield called Alamogordo. There is a bomber, a B-29 bomber, the same type that bombed Japan in the historic raid on Japan, with a very experienced pilot named Bravi, and who is coming in for a landing. The control tower at Alamogordo says, on your way in, can you look at that tower because we lost communication on the north tower that controls all aerial communication with pilots and so on the north end of the range. Okay, again, this is enormous. I mean, this area it's hard to wrap your mind around how big those properties are, and how big White Sands itself is. So he circles around. He sees the two kids. He sees the crashed UFO. He sees that the tower has been bent by something hitting it, and the tower is out of the tower is out of commission. It doesn't have any power anymore, and it doesn't transmit anymore. He reports all that. So when people, including ufologists, are telling us now, how can you trust two little kids? Well, the two little kids were there. We know that. We can coordinate all of that. They are going to be there the next 10 days because they are fascinated with what's happening. It turns out that those two kids were very curious. They were living in a time that was an extraordinary time, and they knew that. And I can relate to that because I was born in 1939, in September 1939. September 1939, a number of countries declared war to Germany, and Germany then declared war, and the World War II began. I don't remember that in 1939, but I do remember that a couple of years later when my town was bombed 18 times because our town controlled two bridges over the Oise River. The Oise River is northwest of Paris, and that you have to go over that river if you're going to England. Hitler had every intention of going to England, and in the meantime, he was going to Normandy to build the fortifications of Normandy against an invasion from the English fleet, which after Pearl Harbor became an invasion from the American fleet and the English fleet together. So those two bridges were very important, and everybody wanted to blow them up. I remember that. I was under those bombs. Okay, the first house that my parents had were renting was hit by a direct bomb. Fortunately, we were my mother and I were in a shelter somewhere when that happened. But I remember coming out of that shelter and seeing essentially a pile of stones where our house had been. I remember that. So I can relate to what those two little kids in New Mexico were experiencing through there. Let me give you an anecdote. Our main witness, Jose Padilla, of Mexican heritage, Mexican and American Indian heritage, Apache heritage. I asked him, we've gotten to be pretty close over the years working on this, and I asked him, what made you want to go inside that object, inside that egg-shaped craft to get an object out of it, to get something from it. And he said, we wanted a souvenir. Well, souvenir is a French word. Why would he be using, I mean, he speaks Spanish and American. Why would he be using a French word? So I said, why do you call that a souvenir? And he said, because in those days, many people in our families, in our extended families, were not coming back from the Pacific, or they were not coming back from Europe. And we didn't have anything to remember them by. So we had to find something, a piece of clothing or a book or a pipe or something that had belonged to, to people in our family, and we called it a souvenir. That's how that French word got into the English language in the middle of New Mexico. Those are the things that you pay attention to when you're on the ground. Forget the big theories, forgive the big things about ETs and so on. These are people who were there when it happened. You have to go back to their time. So, Remy and Jose hear the tower being hit, and they see that object crashing, and it's going to crash over a little bit more than a half-mile section of the hill. It's not really crashing. I mean, in the files we call it a crash, but it was a controlled crash because the object didn't blow up. An airplane would have been shattered into 1,000 pieces. The wings would have fallen off when it hit the tower. That object hit the tower, bent the tower, got it out of commission, fell to the ground. One panel was ejected. We'll talk about that later. But that object, which was it wasn't a flying saucer. There is no flying saucer in this book. That object was described it as an avocado, as an egg-shaped object, the size of 2 middle-sized trucks together. It was 12 to 14 feet high, and longer with a pointed end. And it plowed essentially a boulevard down the hill, okay, over more than half a mile. It was under power at that point, okay? This was not just some sort of artifact somebody had built out of plywood, okay? This was real. And it made a turn under power and stopped against a part of the hillside. And it rested there. The brush caught fire, so that was another thing that the pilot reported, that there was fire there in the brush. The object did not catch fire. The object, contrary to what was also reported later in one book, the object was intact. The two kids they know that when you're in the middle of nowhere and an accident happens of any kind of airplane, your duty is to bring help to the pilots. So they rush there. They're on horseback. They leave their horses and they go close to the object, and then they see this is not an airplane. Not only is it not an airplane, but there is an opening where that panel was ejected, and they can see the inside. And inside they see 3 occupants. And it's not going to be a surprise to you of what they look like. They are short. They are about 4 feet high. They have facial features like us. In other words, they have 2 eyes. They have a small nose, small mouth, smaller than us. Their head is larger than the shoulders, or the shoulders are narrower than the head. They are about the same size. They have 2 long arms, and they have 2 feet, and they seem to be in some sort of panic. They move back and forth, but they don't walk. They translate themselves back and forth. There are other cases in our databases where the beings are described in the same way, where they would just glide along without actually walking. Remy and Jose realized that this is not, we're not in Kansas anymore, and we're certainly not in New Mexico anymore. I mean, this is something else, okay? And they get, so at that point, I read the transcripts of Remy's interview by Paola, and I read the transcript of Jose's interview by Paola, the different transcripts, which are perfect. Paola never volunteered an explanation for them to jump on. Obviously, they are hoping that, she's going to have an explanation. She'll say, oh, and you never did that. You were always receiving the information and letting them come up with. I've been trained to read transcripts because of my work on the internet, my work on developing some of the early social networks on the internet. There were social networks on the internet before there was a web on the internet. And I was part of that as the development of the technology for the Advanced Research Project Agency, for DARPA in Washington, and then for the National Science Foundation, which is a civilian agency supporting science. We did some of the early computer conferences on the network, both national and international, and we needed to analyze the way people would convey information in a group over a network when they couldn't see each other. Okay? And that had never been done before. So we developed techniques for analyzing transcripts of how people would react in that kind of environment, which we applied later to industrial networks, to corporate networks, and to military networks. It's very interesting to look at those transcripts because Paola says, well, where were you and what did you see? And they say, we were on the property and, we were looking for that cow and we did that. And then this happens. And then we're looking at them and they are not looking at us and they are moving. They switched from the past to the present. That's very interesting because it means that memory has come back to the front of their brain, okay? And now they are there. They are not using the past, oh, I did that and I crossed the street and I saw a red car and my friend called me, which is all the past thing, past reconstruction. They say, we were there. We see them. They are moving. They are moving in a funny way. They are not looking at us. We're looking at them. We don't know how we can help them. We're not going to go there. I want to go there. Remy is crying. Remy says, no way, I'm not going there. Okay, this is the real stuff. They are there now. There are lots of theories about how adults remember an incident that happened when they were kids, okay? And the main theory, which is true, I mean, from psychology now, is that an adult will reconstruct from his or her own memory of that time, will reconstruct what happened. That's true in most of the cases. I can tell you from my own experiences of seeing American planes being shot down over Pontoise. I was there and I was about 4 or 5 years old. I remember it in the present. What I can tell you exactly what happened. I'm not recalling something to narrate it to you. It happens again in my brain, okay? I was there and I saw that. There was no shelter, there was no place to go. Our town had been encircled with German batteries protecting those 2 bridges because they needed those bridges to reinforce Normandy. And there was no way they were going to let the American Air Force, American planes, and the British planes destroyed those bridges, and they were shooting those planes out of the sky, okay? And I was there, okay? So I know what those two kids, were living through, and I can relate to what they are telling us, okay? And when there are some ufologists now saying, oh, two kids, how can you trust them? They are making it up to make money. They never testified. They never told their story until 65 years later. So why would they keep that secret? Because there was Roswell. Roswell was on radio. Roswell was on TV 2 years later. Okay, there was this whole thing about other cases. The whole story of ufology developed. They kept their secret. Well, if you go to the local bar there, down the road from their property, you're going to see some of the old posters from World War II, old faded, pictures of old airplanes and so on. And you're going to see posters from those days that say, you see something, you don't tell anybody, okay? You are 10 miles from from White Sands, from the place where the first atom bomb was detonated. The scientists of Project Manhattan came to that little restaurant, to eat hamburgers. I mean, where else would they go, okay? They were there building the bomb. They would go there with Oppenheimer. Nobel Prizes from Czechoslovakia, from Poland, from all over Europe, all over the world, would be there in that little place, working on their equations and eating hamburgers, okay? And the local people thought that they were traveling salesmen, because they had funny clothes and so on, different from the farmers. And those secrets were kept. Nobody talked. And they kept those two men when they grew up. One of them became a highway patrolman. Well, first he went to Korea, was shot in Korea, still has a bullet in his belly, Jose. And then he became a highway patrolman in California, lived in California much of his adult life. They lost communication between the two. They almost forgot that they had gotten an object from inside that craft, on the last day. Ramey went on to a career in business in the state of Washington, was active with the Hispanic groups in politics in the state of Washington, got to know the governor of Washington, and later on one trip, the governor of Washington, Dixie Lee Ray, who also had happened to be the head of the Atomic Energy Commission when it was created after the war, was a very distinguished woman, one of the early women politicians of substance in the United States, governor of the state of Washington. And she showed him the report of the Atomic Energy Commission on the crash that took place at Trinity. So we have all those correlations now. Don't tell me that it was just two little kids who made up a story. Okay, don't tell me that. The kids now have seen this. They lose their sense of time. When I ask Jose, how long do you think you were there looking at these creatures and looking at this object? He says, half an hour. They were there for longer than half an hour. Ramey crying and Jose sort of not wanting to go there by himself. If he told us, if I had. He said,
first of all, he heard them screeching or screaming and I said, what did it sound like? And he said, like when you kill a rabbit. So, when a rabbit is dying, a high-pitched screeching. So he wanted to go in and help them. And Jose is very adventuresome. I mean, I could see where he'd want to run in and help them. And then he says to us all the time, if I had gone in there, you wouldn't be talking to me today. He said, if I had gone in there. But that was, and you ask yourself, they have no frame of reference. There are no UFOs. There are no aliens. There are no ETs. They don't know what they're looking at, if you could possibly understand that. So, of course, his first reaction is going to be, can we go in and give them a hand, because they're sliding back and forth. They were pretty close to that panel that blew out, so they were able to see them. Plus, they had binoculars. The problem is that when you have the area that's on fire with all the bushes, your eyes are irritated. That's why the little one was crying, 7-year-old. And we had that verified, thank God, by Sabrina, who had gone there to look at the area when she was 7 years old. She was living with Jose's father. She said she was told not to go over the hill, but when she went over the hill, she saw the devastation of everything burnt. So we have not only 2 children, we have 3 that verify that area was devastated. And I'm going to add one thing, Jacques. The trees in that area, like the mesquite, were 7 feet high. We go back and it's 2 feet high. So when the atomic bomb, blasted, 150 miles of radiation has changed all the trees, everything there. It does not look like it did in 1945 if the trees were 7 feet tall, and all we see now are 2 feet tall trees. And adding one more thing is that I asked both of them what happened the day the bomb exploded. The town was not told anything. So at 4:30 in the morning, Jose's mother opens the door and sees the light of 1,000 suns. Now put that in when we ask if aliens are good or bad. It's like, and she's blinded in one eye because nobody told them. So she opens the door, and Jose lost his eardrum for the sound of the bomb. And Remy, I asked him, because he lived in another house down the road, and he said he was in his bed, and the bed went right over to the other side of the bedroom. So did those 70,000 people ask why they weren't told? Most of them dying of leukemia. The animals were taken to, was it Oak Ridge, to be looked at to see what because what we were doing is we were exploding a bomb, and we didn't know what happened to the people, the animals, and the flora and the fauna. I just told you they were little tiny trees now, if you go there. Very serious stuff. Somebody was interested in this. Okay, so go ahead.
Thank you for bringing that up, because, again, it's difficult for people reading our book now. I think we've done, a fair job of trying to reconstruct what things were like in those years, but it's very difficult for younger people to understand, to go back to those, to that time, to the way things were at that time. So the kids know that they are going to be, their father is going to be mad at them if they miss, going back in time to their home, which is a few miles away. So they get back on their horses and crying all the way. They go home very confused, and they tell the father, Jose's father, what they've seen. They take care of the horses, and they drive back Remy to his house. And the father says, "Look, let me take care of it. I'm going to call, the authorities, because this happened on our land, on our ranch." And he calls the local police and the state police, and they decide that at some point they are going to go back and check. The next day, the two kids are in town working for their families, tending gardens and so on, so they don't go back. That's the only time when the site is left alone. Not completely, because when they go back on day number 3, they initially cannot find the object. There is a lot of vegetation all over the place, and it's hidden in the vegetation. And the place obviously has been changed by somebody. We think we understand what went on, that when this was the report from the pilot, from Brady, obviously somebody had to go back the next day and check. And we think that at that point the Army, remember there was no Air Force. The Air Force was the Army Air Force. All the pilots were in Army uniforms. So our interpretation is that Brady was sent back to find out what the site was like. They would have gone there with a jeep, with a detachment from the Army Air Force before they could assign the duty to the regular Army guys to go there with an Army team and clean it up and find out what that was. Brady would have camouflaged the object so that it wouldn't be disturbed. They would have cleaned any of the debris that was around from that panel that was exploded. And remember, they had lost the communication tower, so they had to also find out quickly what had happened to the tower. So on day 3, the object is left alone. They finally find it. They clear the brush. The two adults, the policeman and the father, Faustino Padilla, tell the kids, you stay here, we're going to go inside. They go inside the object. This is not an abduction, okay? This is, the beings are gone. There are no visible, life form there. The object is open, left open. They go in, they stay in. The kids can see them being inside. They come out and they tell the kids, look, nobody talks about this. This is not for you. This is not for our family. This is for the Army to deal with it, okay? We're going to report it. Remember there's a state policeman there, but it's not even, the state police at this point. This is something else. So you stay out of it, okay? And we forbid you to, mess with it. The kids understand that, and they're not going to report it for another 65 years, okay? They report it, and then the next day, an Army captain in uniform comes to the home of the Padilla family and says, in Spanish, of course. Remember, again, for people reading our book now, probably have no idea of what conditions were in New Mexico at the time. In New Mexico, you spoke Spanish or one of the Indian languages or English or all of those things if you wanted to trade with other people, okay? But the Padilla family is speaking Spanish among them, and many of the local Army guys, speak Spanish. So he says, Senor, we've lost one of our weather balloons on your ranch, and we'd like your permission to go and pick it up. So Faustino Padilla says, muy bien, you want weather balloons? I've got weather balloons in the back because, this ranch is enormous. It's the size of a French département, for example. It's a huge area. So the Army is launching weather balloons out of White Sands all the time because they need to know the wind directions for Alamogordo, for everything else they do. So those weather balloons drift, and they fall all over the countryside. And being a good citizen, Faustino Padilla picks them up, folds them nicely, and keeps them in the back room. So he comes back with an armful of weather balloons. And I'd love to see a movie with that
Yes,
scene in
great. it. Because he also said we have to cut the fence. He said because the weather balloon will not fit through the fence, and they tell him how long. And Jacques and I we have seen that fence at least 10 times. We know where it was cut. And the Army had to build a road to go down and get this weather balloon. So the road is made by the Army, so we know that the Army made that road because we could see the old road that they used to go on. So, I mean, obviously the father knew that it wasn't a weather balloon, but, the word UFO, flying saucer, wasn't even in the vocabulary in 1945. So what in the world are you going to call that thing?
Yeah, the word flying saucer is going to be invented or reinvented by Kenneth Arnold 2 years later. Okay? The Air Force, there is no Air Force. The Air Force is going to be instituted by, the president 2 years later in May of 1945, okay? 47. In 1945, there is no Air Force, okay? So the captain says, well, it's not one of those weather balloons. It's a new experimental weather balloon. And we need to cut your fence. Faustino says, why do you need to cut my fence? There is the cattle, entrance for the cattle trucks, to pick up the cattle. Why can't you use that? No, we need to bring one of our trucks, and it's bigger than your gate, to pick up a weather balloon, an experimental weather balloon, okay? So everybody at this point knows that this is just a charade. And of course, he says, well, you can cut my fence, and the Army says, you'll have a much better fence. You'll have a big fence. So they come in, and over the next 3 days, they cut the fence, they put their own gate, they come in with equipment, they cut a road, as Paola says, all the way to where the object is sitting. Nobody has touched it in the meantime. The kids watch all of that, okay? They bring in a truck, and this is the one time when I had a fight with Paola. I mean, usually we get along pretty well, but there I said, we need to go back, and I need to ask Jose, what kind of truck it was and how many wheels. And Paola says, well, it's a truck, They brought a truck, they put the thing on it, and they took it back to White Sands. Well, the number of wheels on the truck is going to tell me the weight of that machine, okay? And if it's some sort of hoax that somebody invented, maybe Stalin decided to play a joke on the Project Manhattan, and he sent some sort of funny thing. Well, the weight is going to tell us, and remember that object was pretty airworthy because it hit the tower, it didn't crash, it made a turn, it plowed a boulevard all the way down the hill, and it made a turn under power. No, this is no weather balloon, this is not a joke, and this is not something out of plywood that somebody invented, to play. The truck had a lowboy and a tractor. It's an 18-wheeler. You don't need an 18-wheeler to take out a weather balloon or to take out most things. Okay, these were the regular Army trucks where you could load 2 tanks and take them down the road. Okay, so we think that from everything the kids are telling us, that there was a crane also that they built to lift that thing, okay? You don't need a crane to lift a weather balloon. the best estimate we have is between 2 and 4 tons. Okay, this was a craft, this was a machine, okay, and everything we know about it is consistent with that. The question that you have is, how did it fly? Because it didn't have any propellers, it didn't have any jets, it didn't have any appendices, it didn't have a tail. Okay, it had just a little transparent dome on the back, which was just, big enough so that you could stick your head and look outside, but you couldn't stand there. Okay, that object is about 25 feet long, 14 feet high, and it's sitting there. And the kids are going to go back. And what's very funny is that Jose tells me at that point, well, we had to go back to take care of the cattle. I mean, we had to check the fences. We had to make sure the cattle was all right. That's why we were going there every day. And we were, obviously, they were watching. They were fascinated. They would leave their horses on the other side. I mean, they knew the territory a lot better than the army knew the ranch. They left their horses in the next canyon, doing whatever they wanted to do, and they would creep up through the bushes, and they would watch what the army was doing.
And I'm going to add one little thing. When I'm interviewing witnesses, and they tell me that the soldiers were sick and tired of picking up pieces, so they would make a berm and just take their foot and push the pieces in the berm. And when they're telling me that they're playing country western music on the Jeeps, these are details you can't make up if you tried. So mentally I'm going, there's these Jeeps, there's these young guys that Jose and Remy already knew because they went into the Owl Bar and Cafe all the time. They even recognized the guys that were cleaning it up, and they're playing country western music, and the guys themselves don't know what they're cleaning up because they're not watching television, they didn't read books on UFOs, they don't know what the heck they're cleaning up. But they're sick and tired of picking up every little piece, so they're making a berm, and that's why in the boys' minds, they're leaving things behind, because they don't want to pick up everything. So and those two little kids are just really mischievous. They're watching these young men doing this stuff.
So in the book we have a table with I've reconstructed everything that happened during those 10 days, who was there, what they saw, what equipment was there, how it was the object was taken out, what the temperature was. It turns out the Army has very good records of all of that. So we went back to the weather archives from Los Alamos to reconstruct what the actual temperature was. I wanted to know, again, checking against what Jose was telling us and against the records. Did it rain? What was the temperature? What would have been the conditions to place ourselves in the shoes of those two kids watching all this? So we've got that entire thing documented. On the last day, the object has been loaded on the lowboy. I've learned all these Army terms now on the sideways. Why sideways? Well, because if it's standing up, it's not going to go under the overpass.
There's
and they
an
need to
overpass.
take it back, of course. So they put it sideways so they can go under the overpass on the Great American Highway that crosses over there to take it back to White Sands. So now that's the opportunity for Jose and Remy to see the underside of the object, because they had never seen the underside. There's nothing on the underside. There is no opening. There are some bumps on the metal, and we got a pretty good description of what the metal was like, what the colors were like, what it was like inside, and all of that. We spent a lot of time documenting everything, taking Jose through every recollection of what the underside was. And if there is a propulsion system, which of course I'm interested in, it would fit in a space less than 6 feet by about 3 feet. Okay? And so how does it work? You know, because there is no access to the outside. Okay? So whatever it is, and a lot of people now are speculating about propulsion of UFOs. You're going to see things on TV about physicists who have theories about, you know, relativity and how it could work and so on. But it will have to be reconciled against, you know, this kind of testimony and this kind of thing. So then on that last day, the army has nothing more to do, so it's loaded on the lowboy. The crane is gone. The army grunts go to get a last meal at the local cafe, and they leave the thing standing there. They're going to come back after dinner. They're going to take it and drive it into White Sands. That's the opportunity for the kids to go inside, where they've been waiting for all that time. Nobody is guarding it for maybe an hour. So they go inside. Actually, Jose goes inside, and there is a tarp over the thing, a blue tarp. Now, you know, people told us, no, that's not right. You know, they are lying because tarps were green. It's army tarps are green. Well, we went back to the army archives, and they had blue tarps in the army. So the kids are not making it up. Again, everything we could check, every little stupid detail, checked. You know, their memory is intact. They didn't lie. I mean, this is too important for them to even think about fudging any detail of that. The things they don't know, they tell us, well, we don't know, you know. So they go inside, and there is nothing inside except for a panel that is a double circle. The inside circle seems to be copper, as they describe it. It's color of copper. And there is a spinning thing in the middle, which looks like a bracket. It looks like an ordinary bracket. So, and here, you know, we brought scientists to look at it and so on. They couldn't get the panel, but Jose got a lever. He knew that there were levers on those trucks, you know, to secure the load. And so he tells Remy, go get me that lever. And with the lever, he pulls out that gadget that can spin in the middle of that panel, and we have it. We have it because, and it's donated now to a university to preserve it, to keep it.
I gave it to Jacques. I had it for 2 years. Jose, we have 10 minutes, Jacques. I wanted to tell you to finish this. But what had happened is that Jose trusted us so much, he said, take this bracket. But Jose couldn't talk about it for 60 years because he had stolen something from the inside. Well, I mean, it didn't belong to him. He wanted a souvenir. So there's a whole story what happened with that bracket that is very strange in the book, because they hid it, and there was a paranormal experience around the bracket, and they got very scared. And so when I went to do the story, Remy, this is the problem, you know, the ufologists that are looking at this. Remy, who is different from Jose, wanted money for the bracket. And because he wanted money for the bracket, the ufologists, so we all know, just canceled the whole case. Whole case, without reading anything. And so when Remy died, the day he died, you know, the week he died, I went to the location, and Jose gave me the bracket. And so I put it in a safe deposit box for 2 years until I met Jacques, and I said, here, take this. This was from the inside of a UFO. whether it's our stuff or their stuff or who cares, it was inside the UFO. And that is what's important. Really quickly, because we only have like 5 more minutes, I thought we'd have time for question and answer, but if you grab us, we will answer. There was other materials there, and this is the part, if we ever have a movie, I hope they start it with this. When the panel came off, all this fiber-looking stuff went all over the bushes, and it was all lit up in purple and pink and yellow, and the boys, put it in a big gunny sack. They put it in a big gunny sack because it was all lit up, and they took it home and they decorated the Christmas trees with it. Okay, and their neighbors saw this really nice stuff that was on the windows that looked like, they call it spider web, and they asked for some too. And so the boys gave them from the inside of a craft. Okay, gave them this spider webby stuff, and they had, the whole neighborhood had it. And when we got the other witness, Sabrina, she verified it without Jose knowing, that she said it was in a plastic bag and they didn't have electricity, and she put it on the walls, and all this nice pink and blue lights, spider webby stuff was always lit. So we don't know what the heck that was, but in 1945, scientists are very interested in that. And she also said they didn't have anything to play with. She didn't. So there was this aluminum foil stuff that she'd crunch up and go back to its original its original shape. This verifies the Roswell case, because that's what they said they had. This is 1945. If people would work together, maybe we'd get somewhere here. She's 7 years old. 7 years old, and she's playing with this because they don't have any toys. And she can't make that up if she tried, because she doesn't know what all went on. So my last words here is, there's a lack of collaboration, a lack of cooperation. This really did happen. It was a message to mankind, because you don't have a controlled situation. And Jacques doesn't like it when I say this, but I think that those beings knew that Jacques and I were going to write the book. They knew.
The bracket looked like this. This is not the actual one. The actual one is twice as large. It's 33 centimeters. And this is, any farmer would recognize that, because that's the kind of bracket you'd use in a number of mechanical things. And it was already used in the 40s. It's sort of an actuators. So you have things that attach to this. And for example, in a windmill, you'd have something like this. But when you spoke to the windmill
No, that's
experts,
not a windmill piece.
They say this is not from a windmill.
No.
Okay. It could be from a water mill. It could be an actuator. There are actuators in old aircraft and so on.
Or it could be something we don't know what it is.
It could essentially it rotates around this, this axis, and it transfers motion from, for example, when you need to weather the vanes of a propeller in a windmill, for example, there is something like this, actually simpler than this, that will turn the vanes so that the windmill is not destroyed in a storm. Well, those things are classic, things. So we disagree.
Well, you don't know what it is. I mean, it just was inside.
And some of my physics friends disagree also, because we're starting to look at the structure of that object. I still think that the Army brought it inside the craft to do something, maybe to wrap a wire. I mean, they would be working at night. They had local power. They were miles away from a source of power. But a Jeep, I used to have a Jeep. The Jeep can generate electrical power.
There was a copper circle around it.
You could wrap it around something like this. And so on. We don't, it doesn't explain the whole thing. it doesn't explain what Jose saw. So we have a lot of more work to do on all of that. Sabrina, as Paola mentions, came in later, and she gives us a testimony after the two kids had gone on to their lives. They were young men now. Jose had gone to Korea, had volunteered in Korea. Remy was gone in the state of Washington. And she came in as a little girl growing up on that ranch in the middle of all these extraordinary things. And one last thing that struck me in her description, she had no idea what she was seeing. She was, to her, it was like a toy that
toys,
glowed,
yes.
glowed in the dark with all these colors. Carlo Corso, that both of us knew, you spent time with him, you took him to Italy and so on. I spent 2 days with him going over what he had seen, and he was describing fiber bundles that the army had given him, and so when I asked him, he said they glowed all over the place. Well, optical fibers don't do that. That's not what an optical fiber does. So I had that argument with Carlo Corso, telling him, look, these were, I believe you saw those fibers, but those were not, fiber optics. And because there is folklore in the literature that, the aliens gave us fiber optics, the aliens gave up transistors. This is, to use a good American term, this is complete bullshit. We know where the transistors come from, okay? We know where fiber optics come from. I know the people who invented some of that stuff. They are still living in Silicon Valley. So, and they are among my colleagues, okay? We can't say that, okay, that we got it from the aliens. It's something else we don't understand. And what Carlo Corso was describing is what innocent Sabrina is describing
that they
to Paola
decorated the
today,
Christmas
okay?
trees with. Okay.
So those are the things that tell you that there is a story that we need to keep investigating, and we're far from understanding the whole thing.
And please share this story, because the details of all this, and this is the truth. This isn't something anybody made up. Share this, because these are interesting details of the first crash case told by children that were involved. So thank you for your attention. Of course, we don't have time for questions and answers unless you grab us individually, but we do have a few books here. We can't take credit cards, but we're together so we could both sign them, because I think this will be one of the only times we'll appear together to both sign them if you want a book. So thank you for your attention. Jacques, we could go over here.